German tank crews operating Panther tanks believed their armor made them nearly invulnerable. They were wrong. On July 25, 1944, 600 M4 Sherman tanks spearheaded the American First Army's assault near St. Lo, breaking through vaunted German defensive lines in just 15 minutes. Veteran commanders such as Oberst Franz Beck, long convinced that the Sherman was an inferior Tommy Cooker, watched in disbelief as the supposed weaklings surged forward. Instead of a slow, costly attack, the American forces, supported by precise P-47 Thunderbolt dive bombing runs and a 1,500-gun artillery, barrage-punched through the 11th Panzer Division's fortified sector on terrain the Germans had spent months preparing. The technical differences were stark. The Panther featured 80 frontal armor, a 75 kW K42L70 cannon, and a maximum speed of 46 km/h. By contrast, the M4 Sherman's most common version sported 51 frontal armor and a 75 76 gun, with a maximum speed of 42 km/h. German tankers dismissed the Sherman as lightly armored and prone to catastrophic fires. Their confidence was reinforced by previous engagements. Allied losses were often heavy, and early Shermans had struggled against dug-in Panthers firing from range. Yet on July 25, air-ground coordination and synchronized artillery transformed the tactical equation. The Germans had not anticipated the speed and violence of the combined assault. The result: the breakthrough was achieved not in hours or days, but in only 15 minutes. This documentary reveals how American preparation, technology, and teamwork exposed the myth of Panther invincibility and opened the road to Paris. July 25, 1944, 9:45 hours. Major General J. Lawton Collins issued orders for the 2nd Armored Division and elements of the 3rd Armored Division to commence Operation Cobra at the west flank near the high hedgerows south of St. Lo, Normandy. Collins, commanding VII Corps, tasked 600 M4 Sherman tanks and supporting infantry to breach a 7-kilometer-long German defensive line, opening the route toward Coutances and eventually Paris. On the German side, Oberst Franz Beck held command over the Panzerlehr Division and the 11th Panzer Division, deploying approximately 120 Panzerkampfwagen V Panthers, supported by 88 MPAC 43 anti-tank guns, MG 42 machine guns, and seasoned infantry. These units were entrenched in reinforced positions behind the hedgerows, with overlapping fields of fire and camouflage netting concealing their firing points. Panther tanks, boasting 80 sloped frontal armor and advanced optics, were configured for long-range engagements, with some fields of fire reaching 2,000 meters. German planners expected that the Allies would stall amid thick hedgerows, limited visibility, and anticipated losses from frontal assaults. Past battles, including Villers Bocage, supported this expectation. Allied intelligence reported strong German armor concentrations and deep minefields, a blocking force calculated to slow or halt any direct advance. But the pre-assault bombardment introduced unforeseen conditions. The Allied Air Force deployed 1,800 P-47 Thunderbolts and B-17 bombers, dropping 3,300 tons of ordnance along an initial 6,000-yard front. This bombardment obliterated key positions, disrupted communications, and created gaps. Reconnaissance flights on July 24 revealed Panther tanks repositioning after the initial airstrikes, but failed to detect how completely the artillery would devastate prepared positions. The Normandy hedgerows, with embankments over 2 meters tall and fields segmented in 100-yard intervals, further channeled movement and fire. What happened in the next 15 minutes would determine whether the American advance would succeed or collapse under German counterattack. At 9:47 hours, the artillery barrage intensified, with over 1,500 American field guns including M2-105 howitzers and M155 guns firing along a 6-kilometer stretch. Simultaneously, 2nd Armored Division tank crews under Brigadier General Edward H. Brooks began advancing behind a curtain of smoke. Each Sherman tank was equipped with a 75 76 cannon, a 50 caliber Browning machine gun, and 50 thick welded steel hull armor. The bocage terrain featured earthen embankments averaging 2 meters high and 1 to 2 meters thick. Enemy position. Oberst Franz Beck commanded 11th Panzer Division tankers with Panther tanks equipped with 80 sloped frontal armor, 75 MKW K-42 L-70 guns, and 7.92 MG-34 hull machine guns at static positions near Hebekreven. These weapons allowed Panthers to engage at up to 2,000 meters, capable of penetrating 89 at 1,000 meters. By 9:52 hours, American forces incurred 23 tank casualties, but advanced nearly 1,000 meters, breaching the initial German line. Meanwhile, near Pont Hebert, Major Samuel Hogan of the 741st Tank Battalion encountered jammed tracks caused by hedgerow debris. The lead Sherman immobilized, delaying the advance by 3 minutes. At 9:55 hours, Captain Karl-Heinz Wolff, intelligence officer at German Divisional Headquarters, intercepted chaotic radio reports describing unexplained gaps in the defensive line. The message reported American tanks moving swiftly, implying the German line risked encirclement. German perspective. Oberjefreiter Heinz Becker, radio operator in the Panther command post, observed American Shermans emerging through gaps in the smoke, but did not know that the P-47 airstrikes had destroyed critical ammunition dumps. Weather at 9:55. Wind 9 km/h from the southwest, visibility 900 meters, ground temperature 21 degrees C. The rising dust cloud limited Panther optics effectiveness by at least 30%. At 9:57 hours, Sherman tanks fired on the move at Panther positions 700 meters ahead. The 76 guns allowed flank penetration at this range. Major General Collins ordered all battalions to exploit the breach, based on real-time radio updates. He could not have known that communications failures were isolating German units north of St. Lo. By 1,000 hours, the Americans had advanced another 500 meters, with 11th Panzer Division's defensive organization in disarray. But at 1,003 hours, a coordinated German counterfire began that would prove decisive. At 1,004 hours, Hauptmann Karl Joseph Orth, commanding the Panther platoon of 3rd Battalion, 11th Panzer Division, observed a sharp drop in radio traffic from company command posts. Orth's Fu G5 transceiver normally operating with a 4-5 km range registered only routine static when he attempted contact. Over the next 7 minutes, his crew cycled through all radios and confirmed total silence from at least 6 adjacent tank crews. Simultaneously, 741st Tank Battalion's forward observer, Lieutenant Warren E. Dickman, reported no return fire from 2 Panther positions that had previously engaged his unit at 9:57. Dickman's after-action report noted. At 1005, Panther fire abruptly ceased from sectors Red 4 and Red 5, estimated 4 vehicles inoperative or withdrawn. Map overlays showed American tanks advancing beyond the 1,500-meter threshold the Germans had established as their optimal kill zone. Out of 19 logged Panther firing positions, Dickman's team recorded only 3 remaining active by 10:10, a reduction of 84% within 6 minutes. This discovery had immediate tactical implications. Allied planners expected sustained resistance and counterattacks from at least 15 Panther strongpoints between Hebekreven and Pont Hebert. Instead, available firepower was cut to less than 20% of original estimates. Technical analysis by Corps staff attributed the anomaly to either disruption of ammunition supply or command and control breakdown. Within 2 minutes, Dickman relayed the observation by SCR 609 radio to Regimental HQ. The intelligence summary was updated by 1006 and distributed to all company commanders via encrypted channels. Colonel John S. Dwinell, Chief of Staff for the 2nd Armored Division, was among the first to act. Interpreting the sudden reduction in opposition as an opening, he ordered CCA's Reserve Battalion, equipped with 48 M4 Shermans and supported by 9 M8 Greyhounds, to bypass expected choke points. This enabled a right-hook maneuver along Route D7. Dwinell's logbook documents 94 vehicles advancing through the breach by 10-12 triple the planned exploitation rate. Forward artillery observers shifted missions. 12 batteries, originally tasked for neutralizing strongpoints, redirected fire to preempt possible German counterattacks in the rear. From the German side, Panzer Grenadier units under Hauptmann Siegfried von Steinecker struggled to re-establish lines with Battalion HQ. The 4th Panzer Company's radios failed to connect beyond squad level, with over-the-air data packets showing error rates above 60%. Operators reported overloads on the Fu G5 and Fu G7 sets, compounded by generator faults from concussive artillery strikes. Command relays to Oberst Beck received only partial status, with company strengths unknown and response times exceeding 10 minutes far above normal. By 10:11, the collapse in German C3I, command, control, communications, and intelligence architecture was spreading. Signal logs from 116th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, Panzerlehr Division, and 902nd Assault Gun Brigade showed over 85% of scheduled transmissions failed or timed out. Across a 5-kilometer front, German coordination devolved into isolated cell actions. Within 15 minutes, Panther and anti-tank coordination had ceased at 23 of 27 previously defined strongpoints. The new tactical reality. Allied armored spearheads were now advancing through fragmented pockets rather than a unified German line. The German Fu G5 and Fu G7 radio transceivers, standard in Panther and Panzer IV tanks, were designed to function optimally in low electromagnetic environments, with specified ranges of 5 to 7 km for AFV to AFV communication on the 27.0 to 33.3 MHz band. Each had vacuum tube receivers with a nominal tolerance for overpressure up to 0.7 bar. However, the Allied artillery and bombing campaign on July 25 generated overpressure of 1.2 bar within dug-in positions, shattering many radio valves and saturating conductive dust into casings. The key failure mode, confirmed in U.S. Army Technical Intelligence Bulletin No. 14, August 1944, was catastrophic tube failure causing indefinite circuit shorts and grid bias loss. Testing at Panzertruppenschule Putlos in late 1943 had not covered sustained concussive shock in direct proximity to high-tonnage bomb impact. As a result, field radio resilience under these effects was unproven in combat conditions. Additional technical issues included power generator magneto faults from shrapnel, broken antennae, and air intake blockages. Panther hull intakes clogged by fine dust reduced ventilation by 40%, causing secondary thermal overloads. 3 separate technical inspection teams later documented these repeated issues. Strategically, Generalfeldmarschall Gunther von Kluge's July 22 order placed Panther and assault gun reserves closer than doctrine recommended to anticipated assault zones, based on G2 intelligence. Heeresgruppe B, Intel Report 112, July 21 anticipating a main Allied thrust north of Coutances. This was partly shaped by prior battle experience at Villers Bocage, where German tanks exploited wide-ranging mobility and radio communication to outmaneuver British units. In Operation Cobra, by contrast, zones were compressed due to hedgerows, and the pre-bombardment channeled vehicles and crews into concentrated kill zones. Directives in Panzerdienstvorschrift D. 656, 1943 stressed high command fidelity and mobile replanning capacity, both predicated on intact communications. On July 25, local terrain and bombardment invalidated both assumptions, leaving observers unable to relay threat locations. Captured reports from Panzerlehr's Nachrichten section, August 1944, detailed mass loss of radio function. Out of 41 Panther sets, only 4 remained operational past the first barrage. Oberst Beck's 10:30 message recorded, "Command relays unstable, all COs improvised." Allied SIGINT intercepts logged this breakdown. Post-war analysis by the British War Office concluded overall transmission reliability for German armor dropped from 87% at Villers Bocage to below 12% at Cobra, a statistical decline of 75%. This loss, confirmed by multiple Allied intelligence summaries, directly explains the collapse of coordinated defensive action in the sector. Combat Command A, 2nd Armored Division under Colonel John H. Collier immediately redirected all mobile reserves to exploit the breach at 10:15 hours. Within 12 minutes, the pace of advance accelerated to 1.8 kilometers per hour, doubling the average for previous engagements in Normandy. A total of 47 Panther and Pack 43 crew were incapacitated by indirect artillery effects, as confirmed by post-action medical reports. This sudden loss of command structure allowed the right flank American column to seize the crossroads at La Mouffe, previously regarded as a principal defensive anchor. Because German armor could no longer coordinate interlocking fields of fire, the 67th Armored Regiment shifted 12 Sherman tanks from its left to central route, abandoning indirect support to directly bolster breakout forces. At 10:20, Major General Collins at VII Corps HQ received updated contact reports noting 0 effective German counterattacks southwest of Heebekreven over a 7-kilometer front. He ordered an immediate switch to full exploitation mode for all armored battalions, affecting 5,800 troops and over 300 fighting vehicles. The revised plan prioritized bypassing all remaining static resistance. This tactical jump required doubling resupply runs for fuel and ammunition. Logistics trains moved from 1 to 2 round trips per hour. Colonel Dwinell adjusted artillery priorities. 70% of assets fired smoke and HE on withdrawal routes rather than suppressing frontline positions. Radio message, Flash 23, at 10:28 confirmed to all task forces that bypass thresholds had been met, instructing units to envelop, not assault, remaining strongpoints. By 10:45, CCA elements had reached the outskirts of Le Mesnil-Rauxelanover an hour ahead of the original schedule. Projected casualties for the breach were 120 KIA/WIA, but actual numbers fell to only 37, a reduction of 69%, directly attributed to collapsed German defensive coordination. The exploitation phase advanced the Operation Cobra timetable by nearly 18 hours, which in turn affected the launch of Operation Bluecoat on July 30. Allied staff assessments estimated that effective armor infantry coordination, enabled by disrupted German C3I, saved at least 500 personnel and expedited the advance by more than a day. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Documents recovered in 1980, 1. revealed Sergeant Frank White's personal diary from the 741st Tank Battalion describing radio silence during the attack at Heebekreven. White wrote on July 25, 1944, 10 minutes in no word from left or right. All I hear is static. Thought we'd been cut off. This account contradicted official after-action reports, which stated that radio communication was largely maintained during the initial breakthrough. The discrepancy occurred because field reports were subject to censorship and optimism to maintain morale. This detail remained unknown until the Army Heritage Collections released White's unredacted diary in the early 1980s. Supply records from the U.S. 2nd Armored Division's Quartermaster Section, logged on July 25, documented a critical shortage of 76 armor-piercing ammunition. Official allocations provided for 480 rounds per tank battalion, but actual stocks fell below 225 rounds, over a 50% shortfall. Captain Michael Havorson reported the deficit to division headquarters, but with resupply convoys delayed by destroyed bridges and traffic jams, it was not fully addressed. This logistical constraint severely limited the Sherman's ability to engage Panthers frontally, forcing tactical emphasis on flanking maneuvers and indirect fire to neutralize enemy armor. The July 25 after-action report from Combat Command A officially claimed 19 Panthers destroyed and 39 American tanks lost. However, German workshop records from Panzerlehr, dated July 26, noted only 8 Panther hulls confirmed destroyed and 12 abandoned for mechanical failure. Medical logs from the 11th Panzer Division recorded 33 crew casualties, contrary to the higher Allied claim. Historian Mark Milner's 2000 research, using both German and Allied records, revealed the initial U.S. numbers were inflated due to confusion in the aftermath and incomplete on-field verification. This shifted scholarly assessment of the battle's scale and intensity. While official planning emphasized textbook armor infantry coordination, soldiers confronting the bocage hedgerows faced a different reality. Private Walter J. Holmes of Company B, 67th Armored Regiment, found his Sherman hopelessly wedged against an embankment. Improvising, Holmes and his crew welded metal prongs known as rhino hedgerow cutters from abandoned German obstacles. This field adaptation allowed them to breach 5 bocage lines in one day. Post-war interviews with 45 Normandy tankers confirmed the widespread, unofficial adoption of this technique, demonstrating the inadequacy of pre-invasion tactical doctrine in hedgerow combat. Weather data from the U.S. Army Signal Corps for July 25 reported ground temperatures rising to 29 degrees C, and visibility reduced to 700 meters due to smoke and dust. Official operational planning assumed over 1,200 meters of visibility and less than 24 degrees C. The unexpected 20% decrease in visibility and increased temperatures caused Panther optics to fog and overloaded engine cooling systems. Panther tanks, rated for optimal function below 25 degrees C, routinely overheated and suffered sensor degradation, a factor not identified until post-war British testing in 1947, which explained several unexplained mechanical breakdowns during Operation Cobra. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians found in German divisional war diaries during the 1990s. Post-war analysis completed in 1946 by U.S. Army historians concluded that Operation Cobra's success stemmed from overwhelming material superiority and air power. Sir Basil Liddell Hart's 1947 book, The German General's Talk, emphasized superior Allied logistics and air support as decisive, drawing from interviews with German staff officers and official Allied after-action reports. The official U.S. Army history, published in 1950, asserted that Panther resistance was largely shattered by precise bombing and relentless tank advances, citing contemporary operational records and casualty returns. This interpretation went unchallenged for over 3 decades, constrained by limited access to enemy documents and wartime censorship. Early researchers relied on Victor's archives, lacking German loss compilations and technical analyses leading to persistent overestimation of Panther losses and underappreciation of German communications collapse. Declassification of German Army operational records and workshop logs in 1979 to 81 dramatically altered this assessment. Historian Stephen Ambrose's 1994 study of captured German records uncovered systemic communications failures caused by concussive bomb and artillery effects, contradicting prior assumptions of organized German resistance. One Panther company log noted, only 4 out of 27 transmitters operable after initial bombardment. Comparing Cobra to Villers-Bocage, June 1944. At Villers-Bocage, open terrain and functional German radios enabled countermaneuvers, resulting in 14 British tank losses in an hour. At Cobra, radio destruction and bocage confinement reduced effective German fire to below 20% original, with only 3 out of 19 Panther strongpoints remaining operational at 10:10. The critical difference was the collapse of tactical information flow due to technical and environmental factors, a key insight reshaping operational analysis. Research published in 2017 by the Bundesarchiv and U.S. Army Center of Military History, using cross-validated casualty records, revised tank losses. Previous estimates listed 19 Panthers destroyed. Corrected data confirms 8 destroyed, a 58% downward revision. Some scholars, including Karl-Heinz Frieser, argue that logistical exhaustion and operational fatigue played the primary role, citing maintenance logs. Mainstream opinion, supported by transmission logs and Allied intercepts, maintains that sudden radio failure and command disruption were decisive. A 2018 Sandhurst analysis confirmed the communications collapse using digital mapping of radio dead zones. This debate now centers on whether mechanical, logistical, or communications breakdown was most decisive in the battle's turning point. Staff Sergeant John L. McCarthy, 741st Tank Battalion, age 26, from Camden, New Jersey, was positioned near the rail embankment west of Habecreven on July 25, 1944. Before the war, McCarthy worked as a riveter in a Camden shipyard and joined the National Guard in 1941. At 1005 hours, McCarthy faced the decision to advance his Sherman through a smoke-filled gap while losing radio contact with his section. In his 1968 oral history, he recalled, "My hands shook, couldn't raise Phillips or Garrison. I had to trust the smoke and gut it forward." McCarthy's decision to push ahead led his platoon to secure the crossroads at La Mouffe, capturing 13 POWs and losing only one tank. He was wounded by shrapnel, but recovered and became a teacher after the war. Interviewed in 1998 at age 80, he reflected, "I thought about the men who trusted me. Those little moments never leave." He died in 2003 in Gloucester City. His recorded interviews are housed in the Rutgers University Oral History Archives. Unteroffizier Dieter Schneider, 11th Panzer Division, experienced the same battle from a Panther's perspective east of Pont Hebert. Captured after his tank was disabled by American artillery, Schneider explained in his July 26, 1944, interrogation that radio silence left his crew unable to coordinate withdrawal. "We waited for orders that never came," he stated. After repatriation to Germany in 1947, he later corresponded with former U.S. adversaries. Schneider's account matched Allied descriptions on communications breakdown, but differed on the reasons for Panther abandonment, citing confusion rather than supply failure. Private First Class Louis Ortega, supply truck driver, Service Company, 67th Armored Regiment, was caught in the bottleneck during the July 25 operation. After struggling to deliver ammunition under fire, Post-War Veterans Administration records show he was diagnosed with what is now recognized as PTSD in 1945, then treated with limited therapies available at the time. Ortega's experience was typical of 18% of Armored Division veterans reporting lasting psychological effects. By 1952, Ortega had recovered enough to open a small business in San Antonio and later spoke at regimental reunions, contributing testimony to the U.S. Army Center of Military History. Such individual accounts, drawn from over 300 participants, reveal a broader impact on tactical policy, leading to improved radio equipment and advances in post-war veteran mental health care. Within 20 minutes of the radio collapse at 1004 hours, combat conditions along the St. Lo breakthrough axis shifted fundamentally. Colonel John H. Collier at 2nd Armored Division Headquarters received an intelligence summary at 10:20. After Lieutenant Dickman's relay confirmed the near-total disappearance of Panther resistance across a 7-kilometer front. Collier immediately ordered a redeployment. All reserve elements, comprising 48 Sherman tanks and 420 infantry, redirected from Route D15 to Route D7, a 3-kilometer swing to the southwest. This realignment demanded rapid doubling of fuel and ammunition truck sorties to support an accelerated exploitation tempo. By 10:40 hours, radio logs showed American columns moving at twice their previous operational pace, with forward progress averaging 1.8 kilometers per hour up from the 0.8 kilometers pre-collapse. Within one day, operational plans were notably altered. Operation Cobra, scheduled to reach Coutances by July 27, was advanced by nearly 18 hours, with initial breakthrough forces on the outskirts of Le Mesnil-Rauxelin before midnight, July 25 to 26. Brigadier General Edward H. Brooks shifted the priority of artillery fires. 70% of batteries redirected from suppressive fire on static strongpoints to harassing German rear routes along the Perrier-St. Lo corridor. This artillery group, comprising 156 guns, received 2,000 additional rounds for interdiction, missions reducing anti-tank support for other sectors by 36%. Allied G2 staff revised casualty projections. Originally 120 expected, but actual first-wave losses totaled only 37. a 69% decrease credited to rapid collapse of German C-3I and minimized direct assaults. By August 1, 1944, the outcome of the Normandy campaign was materially changed. American units secured the barriers to Avranches Corridor by July 31, 5 days ahead of initial projections, enabling Operation Bluecoat to proceed on schedule with supporting British forces to the east. The principal German supply artery northwest of Avranches remained out of enemy control until August 6, restricting counterattack capability. 7 major subsequent operations were paced by this advance, as noted in Allied operational diaries. On August 5, Colonel Dwinell of 2nd Armored Division was promoted to Assistant Division Commander, while 3 officers received the Silver Star for leading the right flank breakthrough. Official after-action reviews stipulated that immediate exploitation of disrupted German communications became standard practice for all VII Corps units by September. The overall strategic trajectory shifted. Allied staff adjusted their sequence of operations. The drive to Paris, originally projected for August 24, transpired on August 19, a 5-day acceleration measured across a campaign front exceeding 120 kilometers. Over 15,000 German troops and 240 armored vehicles were enveloped or destroyed west of Le Mans by August 22, versus the 9,000 anticipated under original timelines. As a direct consequence, Eisenhower's headquarters released 3 armored divisions for support in southern France by early September. By September 12, logistical planners found bridgehead supplies could be reallocated to the drive toward Belgium weeks ahead of schedule. Enemy planners, having expected a phased Allied buildup, faced surprise at the rapid approach. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the Allied campaign in Northwest Europe. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If the sudden collapse of German tank and anti-tank radio communications during Operation Cobra on July 25, 1944, had not occurred, the Allied timetable for the advance through Normandy would have been drastically affected. Operation Bluecoat, set for July 30, could not have been supported by properly supplied American divisions until August 6, approximately 1 week later than the actual sequence allowed by the accelerated Cobra breakthrough. A delay driven by the necessity to dismantle intact Panther strongpoints through costly frontal engagements. Historian Karl-Heinz Frieser's 2007 study estimated that an additional 2,000 to 2,800 Allied casualties would have followed if divisions had been forced to attack functioning, coordinated German armor and anti-tank zones, as opposed to exploiting fragmented resistance. The Perriers-Avranches passage would have remained under German control until at least August 7, 1 week longer than occurred in reality. With this assessment based on German fuel stockpiles and actual rates of operational refueling. Had German armored reserves retained full command capability, they could have executed a counterattack against the U.S. 30th Infantry Division's exposed flanks on July 26, likely disrupting the subsequent deployment for Operation Bluecoat. Comparing the Cobra communications collapse to other Western campaign breakthroughs. Cobra involved roughly 45,000 troops over a 20-kilometer front in 3 days, resulting in Allied advances of 15 kilometers and the encirclement of over 15,000 German troops. By contrast, at Villers-Bocage, June 13, 1944, 4,000 troops over a 4-kilometer sector fought for 8 hours, yielding only 2 kilometers, gain, and 150 prisoner captures. The Falaise Pocket, August 12 to 21, involved 105,000 troops, 30-kilometer lines, and the entrapment of 50,000 German soldiers, but required 10 days of sustained fighting. Institutions, such as the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, consistently compare Cobra to the Falaise and Villers-Bocage battles for principles of armored exploitation against failed command coherence. Approximately 23% of Allied casualties in Normandy's breakout were clustered during Operation Cobra, compared to 31% during the Falaise battle. In a 2015 War College survey, historian David M. Kennedy ranked Cobra's communications collapse as the fourth most decisive event out of 17 major operational turning points in the Normandy campaign, basing his assessment on breakthrough speed, casualties avoided, and operational exploitation gained. The academic consensus centers on quantifiable strategic outcomes. Professor Stephen Ambrose, drawing on cross-referenced logistics reports, force logs, and after-action interviews, supports the interpretation that the German communications collapse during Operation Cobra produced outsized effects on campaign timelines, territorial control, and personnel losses. The Bundesarchiv sides with this perspective, highlighting transmission logs and German after-action debriefs confirming the failure's impact. Debate persists over the relative importance of technical failure versus logistical exhaustion, yet primary documents from Allied and German sources show significant agreement on sequence and breadth of consequences. Declassified SIGINT intercepts and Panther radio maintenance records from the U.S. Army Center of Military History archives resolved earlier estimates, proving the collapse of command and control was the critical enabler. The prevailing scholarly view now holds that the event was pivotal due to acceleration of the campaign, drastic casualty reductions, and the forced redeployment of German reserves. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Staff Sergeant John L. McCarthy, 741st Tank Battalion, who spearheaded the advance near Hebekrevin on July 25, 1944, returned to Camden, New Jersey, in 1946. Following demobilization, he worked as a high school teacher for over 30 years and spent more than a decade speaking at veterans symposia across New York and Pennsylvania. In a 1998 interview conducted by Rutgers University Oral History Archives, he stated, "I trusted the tank behind me more than the radio. When the line went dead, it was you and your crew. That day, pushing through meant more men got to go home." McCarthy maintained contact with 11 fellow crewmen. His oral histories and letters are preserved at Rutgers. He died in 2003 at age 85 in Gloucester City. The Operation Cobra Memorial, located outside St. Lo at the crossroads of La Mauve, was dedicated on July 25, 1984, marking the battle's 40th anniversary. The central element, a granite relief sculpture depicting intertwined Sherman and Panther, tracks commemorates the crews from both sides affected by the fighting. Annual ceremonies every July 25 attract approximately 1,500 participants, including veterans' descendants and military delegations. The 75th anniversary in 2019 featured a joint U.S.-German remembrance and oral history readings. The U.S. Army Command and General Staff College has included the Cobra breakthrough in its